All right, so let's jump right into it today. We're looking at Ford and the big shakeup that's happening over in Europe. They are cutting thousands of jobs, and it's not, just your typical company downsizing thing. It's actually a really interesting peek into how much the auto industry is changing as everybody tries to figure out this whole electric vehicle thing.
Yeah, and what's really interesting to me is that Ford isn't just cutting jobs because their sales are down. It's because they aren't selling enough of one specific kind of car. Electric vehicles. And that's like a symptom of a much bigger problem they've got going on.
Yeah, and the articles we've got paint a pretty clear picture of what's going on over there. Around 4,000 workers are being let go, mostly in Germany and the UK. That's almost 15% of their entire European workforce. It's a lot. And this is on top of another almost 4,000 jobs that they cut earlier this year. Plus, they closed a factory in Germany, too.
It's a big move. Even for a company as big as Ford. I think it shows that they're maybe having a hard time keeping up with how fast everything's changing. I mean, think about it. Just a few years ago, nobody would have believed that Ford would be cutting jobs because they weren't selling enough electric cars.
Right. Okay, so why are they making these cuts now? Ford is pointing to a few things. First, they're saying that demand for EVs just isn't as strong as everyone thought it would be.
That's really interesting, because to me that means there's a disconnect between what the people making policy want and what people are actually buying. Ford's even saying that there's a misalignment between the CO2 regulations and what consumers actually want. It's like they're saying, hey, if you want us to make all these electric vehicles, you got to help us get people to buy them.
So it's not enough to just build the cars right. You have to actually get people to want them.
Yeah, exactly. Ford's saying that governments need to step in and give more incentives, like tax breaks or rebates, to make EVs more appealing to people. And they also say that charging infrastructure needs to be way better. Nobody wants to get stuck somewhere with a dead battery.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Ford's basically saying, we're ready to build all these electric cars, but you got to meet us halfway.
Exactly. And on top of all of that, there's the issue of competition. Ford's got some serious competition from those Chinese EV companies that are really starting to take over the European market. They've got good prices and some really cool technology.
So it's kind of a double whammy for Ford, right? Not enough people buying EVs and a ton of competition.
Yeah, it's not a great situation.
And then to make things even worse, overall car sales in Europe are down. Ford sales are down almost 18% this year, which is a lot worse than the rest of the industry, which is down about 6%. They're really getting hit from all sides.
Yeah, it's rough.
So this is especially bad in Germany. They're the biggest car manufacturer in Europe, and these job losses are going to hurt their economy a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely worrying. Germany is a huge player in the car world. And what's happening with Ford is a sign that even the really big companies are having a hard time with this whole EV thing.
And Ford's not holding back on blaming the German government either. They're saying that the reason sales of EVs in Germany have dropped by almost 29% is that the government stopped giving subsidies for them. They even sent the government a letter telling them to change their strategy.
That's a pretty bold move, to publicly criticize a government like that. It shows just how serious Ford is about this and how badly they need governments to help with this transition.
It feels like everyone's trying to figure out how to handle this electric future. Car companies, governments, everybody.
Yeah, and it's all happening at the same time that things are really uncertain in Germany, economically, politically. There's a lot of tension with China and the U.S. It's a lot for everyone to deal with.
So we've got not enough people buying EVs, a lot of competition, and governments who are trying to figure out how to support both EVs and their economies. This sounds really bad for Ford, and maybe even for the whole car industry.
Well, it's definitely complicated. But before we get too pessimistic, it's important to remember that Ford's not alone here.
Oh, yeah. We've also got some articles about other car companies. Nissan, Stellantis, General Motors, and they're all doing similar things to cut costs.
Exactly. This isn't just a Ford problem. It's the whole industry. And it's a sign that something much bigger is happening. We're talking about the future of transportation.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
So before we go too far down the Ford rabbit hole, we have to remember that this is bigger than just one company. It's a global thing. The whole car industry is changing, moving toward electric vehicles. And it makes you wonder what it means for regular people who just want to buy a new car, in a few years.
Yes, that's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture stuff, but this is going to affect everyone eventually. Like, are we even going to be able to buy gas cars in a few years? Will we have to go electric even if we don't want to?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And the answer is complicated. One thing that could happen because of all this trouble Ford and other companies are having is that it could actually slow down how fast everyone switches to EVs.
Really? I thought everyone was saying that EVs were the future.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem. There's so much hype around EVs.
Yeah.
But it's not quite that simple. People need to actually want to buy these cars.
Okay, so what's stopping them? Is it just the price?
Price is definitely part of it. EVs still cost more than gas cars, and not everyone can afford that. But it's not just the price. People are worried about running out of charge before they get where they're going, especially on long trips. And then there's the whole charging station thing. If you can't find a place to charge your car, why would you even buy one?
It's like you need the charging stations for people to buy the cars, but you need people to buy the cars for companies to build the charging stations.
Exactly.
It's a catch-22.
And this is where governments have to step in. If they want people to buy EVs, they need to make them more affordable. Tax breaks, rebates, things like that. And they need to build a lot more charging stations.
So going back to those CO2 regulations Ford was talking about, it sounds like they're saying that the government is making them make EVs faster than people are ready to buy them.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. And they're not totally wrong. But the EU has some pretty ambitious goals for cutting emissions. Those regulations are part of a bigger plan to get away from fossil fuels.
So it's a balancing act for governments.
They have to push for change, but they also have to be realistic. And they have to remember that not everyone's going to benefit from this change.
That's a good point. What about all the people who are losing their jobs because of this?
That's a really important question, and one that people don't talk about enough. The truth is that switching to EVs is going to create new jobs in battery production, software, building charging stations.
But are those new jobs going to be enough to replace all the old jobs? And what about the people who don't have the skills for those new jobs?
Those are good questions. And I think governments and companies need to be proactive here. They need to help people learn new skills so they can do those new jobs.
So again, it goes back to government policies.
It's not just about supporting the car companies. It's about supporting the workers, too. We need to make sure everyone benefits from this change, not just some people.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but what about the good stuff? There has to be some good stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. One of the most interesting things about all this is that new companies are coming in, especially from China.
Yeah, those Chinese companies are really starting to make a name for themselves.
It's pretty amazing. For a long time, Chinese cars weren't very good, but now they're leading the way in EVs. They've been putting a lot of money into research and development, and they're catching up to the Western companies. And in some cases, they're even better.
So it's not just competition within Europe anymore. It's a global race.
Exactly. And that's actually a good thing for people who buy cars.
Yeah.
More competition means lower prices and better technology.
Right.
A few years ago, electric cars were only for rich people. But now more companies are making them. And the prices are coming down, so more people can afford them.
So maybe all this competition is good in the long run, even if it's tough for companies like Ford right now.
Yeah, it could actually help us switch to EVs faster.
Interesting.
It shows that change can be good, even if it's scary at first.
So it's not all bad news for EVs.
No, not at all.
There are challenges, but there are also opportunities.
And the companies that can change and adapt are going to be the ones that succeed.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit better now. We've talked about the problems Ford's having, the effects on people who buy cars, the Chinese companies, and the impact on workers.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It is.
But it's all connected. And it all comes back to how we think about transportation. And that's something that's changing in a big way.
So what's next? Where do we go from here? So we've talked about how this is affecting the economy and people's jobs and all that, but we haven't really talked about the environment yet. And that's a big part of why EVs are even a thing, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The environment's a huge part of this. And it's complicated. I mean, it seems pretty simple at first. No tailpipe emissions. So EVs have got to be better for the planet than gas cars.
Right. Yeah, but like we've been saying, nothing about this is simple. So what's the catch?
The catch is you got to look at the whole picture. It's not just about what comes out of the tailpipe. You got to think about where those batteries come from, how they're made, how much energy it takes to charge them, and what happens to them when they're done.
So it's not just about driving the car around.
Nope, it's about the whole life of the car, from start to finish.
Okay, so let's talk about those batteries.
Well, the thing is, mining lithium and all those other materials that go into EV batteries, that can be really bad for the environment. You've got habitat destruction, water pollution, and sometimes even human rights issues, especially in places where they don't have strong environmental laws.
So we're just moving the pollution somewhere else. Instead of from cars, it's from mines.
That's something to think about for sure. But the good news is that battery technology is getting better all the time, and people are trying to find ways to mine more sustainably. And they're even working on new kinds of batteries that don't use those materials.
So it's not all bad.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And then there's recycling. We're going to have a lot of old EV batteries pretty soon, and we need to make sure they get recycled properly. Luckily, recycling technology is getting better too.
Okay, so that's good. But even if we fix mining and recycling, what about the electricity? If we're charging all these EVs with electricity from coal-fired power plants, are we really making things better?
That's a great question. The thing is, EVs are only as clean as the electricity that powers them. If you're charging your car with electricity from coal, you're not really helping the environment that much.
So we need more renewable energy.
Yeah, basically. We can't have clean cars without clean energy.
It's like you said, nothing's simple.
Yeah.
There's no magic solution.
You got to think about everything.
And people need to be aware of all this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Don't just assume that because you're driving an EV, you're saving the planet. Do your research. Ask questions. Make sure you're supporting companies that are doing things the right way.
It's not just about feeling good about yourself. It's about actually making a difference.
Exactly.
So this is going to take all of us working together.
Yeah, it's a group effort. Governments, companies, regular people. We all have to do our part.
Wow, we've talked about a lot today. From Ford's problems in Europe to how this is affecting people who buy cars, to the environment. It's a lot.
It is, but
Yeah.
it's all really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And it's important.
So what's the main thing people should take away from all this?
I think the main thing is that this whole EV thing is still changing. It's not over yet. There are definitely challenges, but there are also a lot of opportunities. And the decisions we make now are going to shape what the future looks like.
And it sounds like those decisions are going to have to be made by everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this has been really fascinating. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of EVs. We'll keep following this story, and we'll keep you updated. See you
Right.
next time.